Should have just kept with it. What we're doing is
It's ready, Ms. Brianna. All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It's wonderful. Thank you for being here this evening for the 2026 kickoff of the Office of the Public Defenders in Defense of Us, the program where we come into the community, in the community, with the community to exchange information. And by exchange information is our opportunity not only to share knowledge, but to gain knowledge from the communities that we serve. And that is why it's important that we are here today in West Baltimore, our In Defense of Us series. We travel throughout the state once or twice a month, presenting different topics and again, gaining different information from the community. I probably should have introduced myself. I don't think I did. I'm Natasha Darty, Maryland State Public Defender, and I just want to welcome you here. We have a dynamic panel providing information to you. Our topic is building justice, what the new laws of 2026 mean to you, the community, what actual laws have been imposed, and what they're going to look like. Some have already been enacted, some will be enacted on July the 1st, and the rest will be enacted on October the 1st of this year. With that, I'm going to pass it off to our moderator, Kirsten Downs, OPD Director of Systemic Reform, to introduce our panel and get us on the way. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Natasha. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
As Natasha said, my name is Kirsten Downs. I am not only the Director of Systemic Reform, but I'm coordinator of the Maryland Justice Partnership, which is the implementation phase, working with community groups, citizens, state agencies to try to take these reforms that we're going to talk about and see how we can move them into real action that affects real people and real communities. And so we have awesome panelists here that have been working really hard to make changes and are on the ground making sure that these reforms reach the people they need to reach, as well as work with the people who can make a difference for the lives of everyone. But before we get to our panel, I want to talk about what community looks like in practice. And we're here in this beautiful Thread facility. Take a look around because this is what good work looks like. They have just come from a full day, but they were able to host us here. And I want to introduce Josh Sherman, who is their partnership and recruitment manager. That's going to talk a little bit about Thread.
Hello, good evening and welcome to Touchpoint. Thank you all so much for being here. Sure. Sorry, I didn't want to stand in front of the panelists, but
Capture you.
Again, my name is Josh Sherman. I'm a partnerships manager here at Thread. And so Thread is a nonprofit here in Baltimore City. We've been around for about 22 years, and we are in the business of building relationships across lines of difference. And what we do is we work with young people in Baltimore City through 7 different high schools. We take on some of those young people in their freshman year of high school. They are very much not on track to graduate, but once we enroll them into our program, we make a 10-year commitment to those young people to help get them on a path to self-efficacy, and to help lower barriers to resources and access. And so I'm here today to tell you a little bit more about Thread, our model, and the work that we do. And so we would love to have as many of you or any of you come and join us. Thread really thrives off of building those relationships across lines of difference. And so we are constantly recruiting volunteers to come and be a part of that mission and to come work with our young people. And so would love the opportunity to have some of you come out and volunteer with our organization. We do ask that our volunteers make a 1-year commitment. And in that 1 year, you would get connected to a Thread family. And so I think one of the things that really separates us from other mentorship or educational opportunities for young people is not only do we make that 10-year commitment, but we also place our young people in what we call a Thread family. And so a Thread family is one young person and about 3 to 4 volunteers that help to work with that young person. Could be coaching, could be mentorship, could be helping to lower barriers to resources. And yeah, we're just really excited to have you all in our space. We are just coming off of Thread Hours. So Thread Hours is a weekly program that we run every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Wednesdays in this space, Tuesday and Thursday on site at our 7 site schools across Baltimore City, where our young people can come together and access resources and come and kind of meet with their volunteers. It looks like the slide is up on that one, but if we go to the next slide, if you scan that QR code, you're able to sign up for a volunteer training. So all of our volunteers go through a training, and once you go through that process, you would get placed into community. I will be here for the entirety of the evening. We also have other Thread staff around. You'll probably see us with shirts on. But if it is of interest to you, please do come up to me. We would love to have you join our community. And we also have some resources on that back right table where you can also sign up to volunteer. And it just means that I will give you a call sometime in the next couple of weeks to talk more about it. But really appreciate your time and attention, and I will hand it back over.
Okay, let's get into our community conversations. I'm honored to be joined by Trina Selden, Heather Warnken, Adrian Brenenstein, and Christopher Dews. Each panelist is going to give a different perspective on some of the bills that were passed or some of the initiatives that were discussed over the last session. The goal is to make it important and understand how it affects everyday people. A lot of times we have these conversations and we're just advocates talking to advocates. And so we're really here to let you all know what really is happening and how it can impact your everyday life. I'm going to start with Chris Dews. Chris, I want to start with you and discussing housing and family stability and the bills that you were a part of that touch on those areas.
Beautiful. So first of all, I'm Christopher Dews. I represent the Center for Urban Families in West Baltimore, not too far from here. The Center for Urban Families is a very, very powerful, large, prominent workforce nonprofit that focuses on family strengthening and economic stability, targeting specifically fathers from lower income communities and how do we ensure that they have access to employment, housing, and so that they're in position that they can fully take care of their families in the way that they're supposed to. So from that perspective, a variety of different pieces of legislation did pass this year. I'm only going to go through like a high overview because we have 3 other wonderful panelists to discuss these things. So the first one I want to mention is actually a bill called Transfer Death on Deed. This was something that was sponsored by the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, and it was to address the tangled title issue. This is what happens when an individual, let's say an older gentleman or mother passes away, and then the child then takes possession of the house, but there are all sorts of, let's just say, issues with the titling that have not been addressed with regards to the house being passed down. That leads to, let's just be blunt, legacy wealth issues and kids not being able to fully own the properties that their parents worked, bled, and died for so that way stuff does not stay in their name, from tax sales and many other different things. The transfer of death on deed is designed to simply fix that issue, to ensure that when it comes to legacy wealth, that those houses and properties stay in the family so that these families can build intergenerational wealth. The second thing I want to highlight is a bill that I worked with Life After Release on, and the Baltimoreans United for in Leadership Development, and that is the Fair Chance in Housing Act. This bill, it's a lot, so I'm just going to say it in 3 simple points. All misdemeanors, mostly, will not be used against individuals in rental housing applications if the rental housing provider owns more than 5 units. So if it's a relatively large landlord, a misdemeanor will not be used against them. If it's a felony and it's been 5 years since the individual was convicted, not since they were released, 5 years since they were convicted, that felony will not be used against them, except for in 5 specific instances. And I want to say that is murder, human trafficking, sexual offenses, child offenses, and I want to say the usage of CDS of methamphetamines on federally assisted housing. Very specific thing. But if it is not in one of those 5 areas, then that record will not be used against the individual solely when it comes to rental housing applications. So that's on the housing side. On the family and economic stability side, we took a very strong stance in looking at how do our family laws impact access to workforce and access to resources. So the 2 big ones that I want to highlight this year were wage garnishment caps. So we're looking at not just how do we support children, but how do we support the parents that support the children. And one of the biggest issues that we have in our wonderful city of Baltimore is that individuals who have children who are non-custodial parents can be garnished from 50 to 65% of their wages when they then decide to go to work because they have back child support. So what happens in that situation, though we do care about the child, when an individual comes home with 35% of their check, which is mostly on the disposable income side, they just drop out of the workforce because I can't speak for any of you. Some of you may be more well off, don't want to sue for you, but 35% of your check is not enough to live on in this modern economy. I'm sorry. 35% of your check is not enough to live on in this modern economy. So simply what this bill did was we took a recommendation from the former federal chair of child support herself, a woman named Vicki Turetsky, and we reduced that cap from a 65% garnishment down to a 35% garnishment for lower income parents to incentivize that they stay in the workforce and keep working. As a workforce practitioner myself for many, many years at an organization not too far from here, I saw what happens when you train people, put them through all these workforce programs, then you place them and they get that first check, realize they can't afford to live off of this, and they drop out immediately, which is ineffective for workforce, ineffective for the employers hiring them, and most importantly, ineffective for the children that are supposed to be supported by these parents. And the last thing I'll say is House Bill 1490, which has to do with temporary cash assistance. One of the other issues with regards to child support and family law reform is that individuals are, let's say you are a custodial parent, you have possession of the child, you are kind of forced to put the non-custodial parent on child support if you are seeking to receive temporary cash assistance. This leads to a lot of conflict and drama between the parents, and what this bill simply says is it allows a good cause exception for the custodial parent to say, I don't want to actually do that. I don't want to put my the non-custodial parent on child support for whatever reason, and then the Department of Human Services has to honor that. We also had 2 bills from last year having to do with stopping license suspensions for the inability to pay child support, and what's called 100% pass-through, which simply ensures that by 2030, every dollar that a person pays in child support actually goes to the custodial parent. Since primarily in Maryland, custodial parents are mothers, we want to ensure that even if mom is receiving some type of TCA or any type of benefits, that if dad or whoever is paying the child support, that it actually goes to the mother and not back to the state for cost recovery. The way the current law works before we work to get these bills passed. And I really want to give a special shout out to Zachary Alberts, Director of Advocacy from the Center for Urban Families. He's brilliant, he's great, very diligent on these issues. But simply put, if you were receiving $500 in temporary cash assistance and you have 1 child, the max that you could get is $100 of that $500, because the other $400 would go back to the state for what's known as cost recovery. We wanted to ensure that the mothers are supported, that the fathers are supported, so that so that the children can be supported as well. So that's what the Center for Urban Families does: family strengthening, economic stability, and we also have a home ownership program, but I won't talk about that in this current one. So I'll pass it to Mike.
Thank you, Chris. Just as a follow-up, what should people look for, or what information should they seek to make sure that these reforms lead to real benefits, as opposed to just knowing that they exist and people aren't able to take advantage of them?
Excellent question. I would always say you can pass legislation, but it's not real legislation if you don't have implementation. So I would say on the, how do I say this nicely? On the call to action side of things, if you or anybody that you know or any practitioners that you're working with are working with individuals on the child support front and they have had their licenses suspended, one of the nuances of the bills is that you have to actually call into DHS. We've had conversations where sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and sometimes that's intentional. But if you have individuals who are experiencing license suspensions in that specific perspective, there's a wonderful gentleman in the back. He's got a great beard. His name is Zach Alberts. Please reach out to him, talk to him. We're actually doing implementation work on that now. Also, when it comes to the wage garnishments, that doesn't go into effect until 2028. But if you or somebody you know has experienced the wage garnishment, just please reach out to the center. We're kind of doing like some case study work, and we're kind of working with a lot of the Child Support Guidelines Committee and partners to ensure that this stuff is properly implemented. On the transfer death on deed, you're going to hear me say the same call to action. If you or anybody that you know is caught up in anything like that, please, again, talk to either myself or Zach. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take your stories, have conversations with those in leadership, and ensure that implementation is properly acquired. But and follow-up is incredibly important. I thank you for highlighting.
Heather, and talking about jury service and jury disqualification, can you talk about the reforms that happened in this year?
Well, hi, everyone. For those of you I don't know, I'm Heather Workin. I'm at the Center for Criminal Justice Reform at the University of Baltimore School of Law. We've worked across a range of issues this session, both on offense and defense, both advancing policies and meaningful change for our communities and protecting the good policies that we have, which is also really important in this climate. But I'm so excited tonight to highlight one that I think could be truly transformative for the state of Maryland, one that folks worked on for many years and finally got over the finish line this year, SB 322 on jury disqualification. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the issue across the country and why this matters and where Maryland was currently before this law that will take effect in October. So as you can see on the slide, this is an issue across the entire country. Most states have some sort of very extreme exclusion policy. In many states, any felony conviction can bar a person from being eligible to serve on a jury, and often for life. There's a image there of a report from the Prison Policy Initiative that does a map of the United States and really breaks down this issue and where the policies are currently. But one thing that's really important to highlight about this is that Maryland took this a step further. So Maryland had one of the most extreme out of those already very restrictive policies, where in Maryland, any felony conviction and some misdemeanors on your record, if punishable by a year or more incarceration, meant that someone was permanently ineligible to be able to serve on a jury. And what that means is eligible to be even called for jury service. So really, this is a twofold injustice that really cuts at the core of systemic legitimacy. Because on the one hand, you're denying people impacted by the system the access to a fundamental right to a jury of their peers. Because we were literally excluding 1 in 3 Black men from the jury pool. And I remember in the hearings in Annapolis, you know, we talked about that statistic, and some of the members of the committee are like, no, that can't be right. But like, no, that really is what this translates to. Like extreme, like whole swaths of the community not even being eligible to be called for jury service, much less to actually serve on a jury. And so that denies people access to a fair trial. It's a whole separate issue, how few people actually access their right to go to trial rather than plea. But this is one of the reasons why, because there are so many forms of this injustice that show up. But then on the other side of it, and that's what I'm also so excited to emphasize about the community empowerment piece of this, was the exclusion of people for their right to serve. That, we've come such a long way in this country in really elevating and fighting for the right to vote. And that is still in this moment, a right that is under attack and that is getting a lot of attention, especially after the recent Supreme Court hearing or case. But the right to serve on a jury is also a profound form of civic engagement that is about participating in society. You can see also up there an op-ed that I co-authored with Kiana Johnson, who's been an amazing leader on this issue, and was just last night won her primary to serve as clerk of the court in Prince George's County. From Life After Release. It's amazing. She speaks about this so powerfully, but basically we've come such a long way in educating community members about why they should have the right to vote, and when they do have it, why they should exercise it. But we're not really quite there yet when people get their jury summons, nor are we talking enough about the profound injustice that it meant that so many members of our community never got their jury summons at all. And really, jury service is one of these truly meaningful forms of civic participation that the Supreme Court has called one of the most meaningful ways that ordinary citizens participate in democracy, the way that ordinary citizens become instruments of public justice in our community. Because when you have a jury of your peers that actually reflects people that have experienced the system, people that have a range of different life experiences, their ability to sit in judgment and deliberate on the facts of a case and just outcomes is dramatically changed. So fast forward to this huge sea change for Maryland, SB 322. Basically, SB 322 changes this in a dramatic way in that it is no longer a lifetime ban on service, that once someone has completed their sentence, they are eligible to be called for jury service again. And this is a really important distinction and a part about empowering the community to talk about this and educate others and change this narrative. Because this doesn't mean that people with past convictions automatically are going to be on juries. It just means that we are a part of the pool just like everyone else. So for example, crime victims, people who have worked in the criminal justice system, people who've experienced a different crime, if they get called for jury service, depending on the particular facts in that case, you might be asked a set of questions in the voir dire process to look at individual bias, how individual life circumstances. But just like we don't have a law in the state of Maryland that said if you've ever been a crime victim, you're not eligible to serve on a jury because we don't think you can be unbiased. No, we don't do that. We call people in. We recognize diversity in our communities, life experiences in so many ways. And then in the process of having that trial, we try to impanel a fair jury. So now people, there's two things that I want to emphasize in making this real in the community with your important follow-up question, because implementation is going to entail two big themes. One, there's a lot that needs to happen administratively, and that I think that we all need to be aware of so that people are being actually called, so that the administrative function of the courts is really changing pretty significantly the status quo and now needs to identify people who have completed their sentence and are now going to be eligible. So we need to do advocacy and work with the state and work with counties and make sure that people are actually getting called for jury service. And then we need to make sure that people understand the power that they have when they do get that summons. It gets like a joke, a trope that people want to get out of jury service, that it's such a drag. So understanding what a profound responsibility and empowering role that is to come and be in that role, but then also fighting for equity so that people can do it. There's so many issues. And again, people like Kiana Johnson and others that have been leading this are also fighting for things like the compensation people get, the accommodations that people get with their employer, childcare, all the types of things that make it really hard to just take a day or many days, you know, depending on what the trial or the service looks like, to come and actually step up and serve. So we have a lot of work to do to make this real, but I think if and when we do, it could truly change the way that justice is administered, especially if we start talking about all the ways in which the status quo was preventing us from having that fair chance of justice in our system. So happy to answer questions or talk more, but those are the basics.
So I would just ask, in the same vein, what can communities do to demand that this move at the pace that it should? Because I imagine, because it's so administrative, that there are going to be a lot of barriers put into place. Oh, we don't have time to do that. We don't have the resources. You know, this is kind of low level with our budget is only this big. You know, what should we demand happen so that when this becomes in effect, we can make sure that those that have been denied this fundamental citizenship right now and recoup it because it's available to them?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I'm so glad you asked this follow-up, because it also ties into the narrative change work that we need to do, because I think part of advocating for the resources, the urgency, because like Chris said, it's not real until it's implemented. And so often the hardest work starts after the bill actually passes, because these mandates are unfunded. You know, we don't have the right state actors at the table who can actually do that heavy lifting administratively. So I think part of that fight and that advocacy is people need to understand how important this is. So like the comparison I made about the right to vote, you know, and how much people are willing to raise their voice, you know, to do poll watching, all the protections that come with making the right to vote real, all the re-enfranchisement of people who've been impacted by the system, getting their right to vote again. I think elevating jury service is to that kind of stature is part of it. And pushing back on the misinformation. So I'm glad you asked that. I don't want to like call out the governor directly, but we dealt with so much misinformation in the process of fighting to get this bill passed around what does it mean to allow people who have past convictions onto juries? Won't that be unfair? Won't that be biased? And you know, a lot of kind of sort of fear mongering about what that meant, rather than saying, no, this is about every other area of advocacy that we do to re-enfranchise and re-empower people in this. But access to removing collateral consequences, access to housing, access to stable employment, access to student loans, all the things that when someone has served their time, it was not meant to be a life sentence in perpetuity of not being able to be a part of the community. This is just like that. And so, you know, we've had a lot of leadership from the administration, doing expungement reform and clearing barriers to participation in society for people who have had system involvement. There's no reason that the governor should not have proudly put his signature on this bill. I am so relieved that they let it go into law, but we need everyone rallying around to understand the significance of it in the way that you just asked that question.
Thank you. You know, I think just as you're saying, really changing the narrative. You know, part of our program is not just implementation, but looking at what are the causes of mass incarceration. And a biased jury, a jury not of your peers, is one of the fundamental factors that cause our those that are convicted, those that have long sentences. It's all an element of that. And so this is an opportunity to kind of peel back at least one of those elements to change of the larger picture. So thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. Next, I'm gonna move to Adrienne. She's gonna talk about the behavioral health issues and 988.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adrienne Reinstein. I'm the Vice President of Policy and Communications at Behavioral Health System Baltimore. For those who don't know us, we are a nonprofit organization and we serve as the city's local behavioral health authority. So what that means is we serve the role as overseeing all the mental health and substance use services in the city. So we don't do direct service, but we oversee and partner with providers and other system partners like the Office of Public Defender to make sure that people have access to care. So I've been doing policy and advocacy work at both the federal and state level for nearly 20 years now. And I keep coming back, even though every year I think about quitting my job, usually in March or April. You all know why. For those who don't know, that's usually when session. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about 988, but also how did we get here and the problem that we're trying and have been trying to solve with some of the policy initiatives that we've been pushing at the state level for the past 7 years. So what you see on the screen now is a quote from me. This was a quote that was in response to a police-involved shooting of a man who was experiencing a mental health crisis. His family, his loved ones called 911 to get him support. Police showed up. He was cornered in his basement by several officers and went to move and he was shot. Thankfully, he did not die. But it was not the response that we want to be given. This quote is 8 years old. And it will outlive, quite honestly. People still bring it up that I said it. We got a lot of heat for saying this, but this is how talking to the media and getting your issue in the media is also part of advocacy and how you get it done, how you get your work done. So yeah, this happened 8 years ago. I think, oh, can you all hear me? You can't hear me? I will yell. Okay, is this better?
Yes.
All right. This is my mom voice. All right. So yeah, so this happened 8 years ago. We all know too often we have police officers show up or we have people in crisis show up in our emergency room. And too often when the police officers show up with red and blue flashing lights and a weapon, it ends up in harm for the individual who's experiencing that mental health event. So we have long known at BHSB and some of the other advocates I work with that we need an alternative response other than having people have to call 911 or showing up in the emergency room. Those are not the type of health and therapeutic response and compassionate response that people need when some of the times people are experiencing some of the worst things of their life on that day. So we've been doing a lot of work over the past several years to advance our advocacy agenda as it relates to behavioral health crisis response. Don't know if this video is going to work, but so the solution, the policy solution is, and the change that we need is a systemic reform. We need a comprehensive behavioral health crisis response. That's an alternative, again, to people having to call 911. We recognize that crisis is a personally defined situation. So what might be a mental health crisis to me could look very different to Kirsten, could look very different to everyone else sitting next to me. It's, and we need a system that's responsive to people's unique needs in that way. So one of the things that we've been working on is the 988 helpline. I think we're going to try to give this a go. If you can't hear, that's okay.
When they call, they will get the message. And then right off. Support. That's all. They're talking to someone they can actively. You know what? A friend to talk to is chaos that's happening.
All right, so this is not working. But there I go, trying to be fancy and have a video. So who's heard of 988? Just by show of hands. Okay, that's good. That kind of represents, I'm glad it's not no one, so that's good. That's why I'm saying it's good, but I wanted to see all the hands raised. So it shows how much more work that we have to do to educate our community that this resource is available. We at BHSB actually did a citywide survey December of last year to see what is people's awareness of 988, and we learned that about a third of adults in our city are aware of it. So it means 2/3 of people still don't know that it's even out there. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. But let me shift a little bit to talking about the policy that we've been working on and how we got here. And so I'll start with just where I see 988 as a huge opportunity for community change and impact at the local level. It actually used to be, so before 988 became to exist several years ago. There was a 1-800 number that you see on the screen. It was, I don't remember, 1-800-TALK, I think. Yeah, that's it. So this was the 1-800 number that was for the suicide prevention lifeline. Congress, several years ago in 2020, passed the National Suicide Hotline Designation Act, which established 988 as the phone number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. So when they passed this legislation, it did a couple of things. It established 988. It demanded that HHS create standards for our crisis system, but the 988 is where we see the greatest opportunity. It's an easy to remember number. It mirrors 911 in that it's signaling like that it is something that you can call for emergencies, and allows people to get connected to local callers. So I need to yell more. Oh my God. Okay. Allows people to get connected to local counselors, which is you would have gotten from the video, and hopefully we can share it out with you afterwards. But one of the great things about 988 is if you do call it, and you're in Baltimore City, you will get connected to a local counselor here who knows our resources and can connect you to a variety of services and supports that are in Baltimore City. The other great thing about this federal legislation that passed, and this is where it leads to our state work, is it gave states the authority to levy a fee to permanently fund 988. This resource had historically been funded by very small grants. In Baltimore City, we got a $3,000 grant from HHS. Yep. To support our helpline. So the state has been kicking in a lot of money over the years. The city has as well, but this federal legislation gave us the opportunity to levy a 988 telecom fee, which is, I might add, the same way that we fund 911 in our state is through a telecom fee. So if you look at your phone bill, I don't know how often you all do, maybe some of us are looking at it more lately. There should be a line there for fees. One's for 911 and one is for 988. And that is the result of the legislation that we worked on over the past. Yeah. So next slide, but let me kind of walk them through it, because this was a multi-year effort that we started as soon as Congress passed that bill. We started organizing here at the state level in Maryland. We pulled together over 80 different organizations, and we launched a coalition. We called ourselves the Maryland 988 campaign, and we knew we had several years of work ahead of us. When the bill at the federal level initially passed, we had a change of administration here in the state level. It was very clear they weren't going to entertain the idea of a fee. Let's just call it what it was. It's a tax, it's a fee. We knew we were going to get hit by that, so we had to do some work. The first legislative session we had opportunity to do that work, I think, was 2021. And so what we did is we set up a trust fund, which was basically a new financing mechanism. So that, because we knew we wanted to get this fee passed in a year or two or the next year, so we needed some place for that telecom fee money to go. So we set up a trust fund the first year and got, I think, $5 million. It says it on the screen. $5 million appropriated that first year to kind of build that up. The next year we went in and it still wasn't the right year to ask for our fee. So we just asked for an increase in appropriation. I think we got $12 million that year. Finally, it was time for us to go in and ask for our fee. So we did a couple of things leading up to that session. We did statewide polling to see, would people even be willing to entertain this idea of having a small fee on their phone bill? We got an overwhelming support for it, 80%, and that included Democrats and Republicans that were willing to pay a nominal fee on their phone bill to have this universally available resource in our community that's an alternative to 911. So we took that information and we lobbied our legislators and we built our political capital, and long and short of it is we got it done. So yay. But we are in implementation period. So we got that done in 2024. We had 2020, that it didn't go into effect right away. So the comptroller's office is the collector of the fee. They needed some time to set that up. So the fee has only just been collected for 1 year. One of the things that we're learning through our implementation is that the fee is not generating the revenue that it was anticipated to generate. It is around $6 million short of what we were anticipating it being generated. So that's why implementation is really important. You can't just pass this bill and say, we're done. Keeping track of it. If we had not been keeping track of this and staying in touch with the helplines across the state to see, are you getting the money? Are you getting the grant dollars for this? Is it supporting your operations? We wouldn't really know, how things are going. So it's $6 million short. that's telling us we have more work to do ahead of us. Something's not right with the fee, maybe we all did our math wrong, I don't know, but that is where our advocacy is leading us ahead in 2027. So a little action this year just to keeping track of things, but part of why, you can go to the next slide, part of why Kirsten and I really wanted to share this with you is because it is a resource that's available to our community now. Even though we're doing our advocacy work and we'll continue in the next session, it's available now. We are out in the community. There are 988 materials back there at the table if you would like to take some with you. But one of the things that, I mentioned earlier that only a third of adults know about 988. We all in this room and all the partners we work with around Baltimore City, we all have a role in helping to spread the word about 988. So we build trust through conversations, we build trust through connection. That's what you see us doing here on the screen. You may see members of our team out in the community handing these things out. If you are interested in partnering with us, please come see me afterwards. I'd be happy to connect with you because we know one of the best ways to spread the word about 988 is at the grassroots level with trusted partners. So thank you for giving me a chance to talk about this great resource.
Thank you, Adrian. Follow-up, I want to bring you full circle to the problem that we started with. How do you envision 988 can really reduce those instances where the response doesn't match the need?
So so one of the things I didn't talk about is I really focused on just the helpline is how valuable 988 can be in connecting people to other resources in the community. So it is it's comprehensive in that if you or a loved one is experiencing a mental health crisis, whatever that might look like for you, the helpline the counselors can be very supportive and adaptive in that moment. So one of the great things about, couple of great things about our helpline in the city is one, we pick up the phone really fast, which is really important to us. We can pick it up on an average in 17 seconds, and we've been maintaining that. When we know people are calling us on potentially the worst day of their lives, we need to be there. And so that is a metric that we look at regularly. But the other thing that we look at is, are we able to help resolve the caller's crisis and issue over the phone? And around 85% of our calls are resolved over the phone. That means around only 15% need some kind of in-person response, but 988 can deploy an in-person response that's so we can deploy what we call our mobile crisis teams, which is a peer and a clinician that will come out to the person in the community and work with them to stabilize them. Very often when our teams do go out, it means that that person is stabilized in the community, whether it's in their home or getting connected to community-based care. Our data shows that rarely we need to transport them to the ED. And so that's what we want. So I think to answer your question is, it still, for me, kind of goes back to, are people aware this resource is available and what all it can do for them? And that's the long work and the hard work that we all have ahead of us.
Thank you so much. All right, Ms. Trina, we're going to get to you and talk about reentry and voting and your successes this session.
Our biggest success Hi everyone, my name is Trina Selden. I am the founder and executive director of Out for Justice. Out for Justice is a grassroots organization led by justice impacted people for justice impacted people and by justice impacted people. We are on the ground, we're the ones that's doing the work. We work, to sum it up, we work to remove unjust laws and policies that may hinder successful reentry, however that may look. We do a lot more than that too. We work with people that's coming from incarceration to stabilize them, not so much as providing direct services, but giving them the structure that wasn't provided to me, right? Because I was one that came home about none of the things, which pissed me off. So I guess that was a good thing. That's how Out for Justice was birthed. But yeah, we at Out for Justice try to make it so that the next person that's coming in will have it a lot easier and won't have to face the many barriers that folks often do.
So what did you successfully accomplish this year?
This year, automatic voting rights for those coming from incarceration. Not having to petition for. Big deal, because I came home and they told me that I could, they didn't tell me anything. They told me that I could vote. I got a voter's card and all of that. Went to vote and was told that I couldn't vote. So I'm like, well, it was a lot of misinformation, no information. There was a lot of services that people didn't know about. So one of the things that I did, the program that I came home in, I made sure that they were making sure that people that was within 18 months of their sentences was born in the different entities like we do at the All Night Community Resource Clinic, making sure that they go in and have these services provided to those coming from that's about to come home.
Okay. So what changed in this legislation this year?
The people, I think, showing up, just they can assume all day long that that this is not an issue. But if everybody isn't, if all the people that we work with, justice impacted folks, if everybody's saying that this is an issue, this is an issue. You want us to come home, you want us to be productive citizens, you want us to work, you want us to pay taxes. Why we can't vote?
So what can people now do that they couldn't do before this legislation passed? Okay.
That's the biggest flex.
And how will they know? How do they make sure that they are securing their ability to vote?
They shouldn't. It should be automatic.
Okay.
It should be.
But how are we
automatic.
checking that it's working?
So I could, that's
Go
my
ahead,
part.
go
That's why I
ahead.
love.
Go ahead.
So the way that they will work is that now the State Board of Election is gonna have a partnership with the Department of Corrections, in that all the voter rolls, so about 6 months before a person is released, they're gonna check the voter rolls to see if that person was eligible to vote or was registered to vote before they were incarcerated. So now, before they are released, they are working to make sure that they are registered when they are released. So, I mean, you can check your voter registration pretty much anywhere online. And I think through Out for Justice, we also check people's voter registrations as well.
Absolutely.
But come January 1st, 2027, individuals will no longer have to, when they return home, re-register. They will automatically get their registration back. So it saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of confusion. So individuals, like Trina mentioned, won't have to show up to the voter polls and say, actually, you're not registered. It just eliminates a lot of confusion. We worked for years to get that done, and Trina did a really good job testifying and making it happen.
That's what we do. Did you know campaigns or did you know campaigns? So we make sure we follow up on all our socials, making sure that everybody knows about all these terrific things that I have.
So what can we do as a community to make sure, just like I'm asking everybody, what can we do to make sure that what was promised is actually realized? Because sometimes this is another issue that's an administrative, that eventually somebody's going to say, we don't have the people or we don't have the resources to really put it into action as the way that it was promised. So what should we do to make sure that we keep people moving forward on this issue?
Help us to keep them accountable.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Help people to make sure we hold them accountable.
Oh, okay.
We're taxpayers, right? They work for us. Right.
Thank you. I think what this shows, one, is that all of this amazing legislation is fantastic, and these hard advocates and the communities that they work with have worked, none of this happened just in one session. It happened over many, many years, a lot of tears, a lot of late nights, a lot of talking to people who didn't think that the communities that they were working for, that we work for, deserve to be fully realizing what it means to be a citizen in Maryland. And so that work now needs to go to the part where we make sure that these promises are realized. And we can't do that alone. We have to have everyone, one, know about them, which is why we're bringing these issues to you. And then when the time comes for this to happen, make sure that those that are responsible for these changes and these reforms carry through with what this legislation requires. And so we're asking to make sure that you know about that. You know, pick your issue. What is it that really resonates with you, with your community, with your families? And, you know, do a watch. Make sure that people have this information, share this information, point them to the right directions so that that these things can be realized. Also, what's important too is as we realize these changes, it gives us information to then move the needle even further. So, you know, once one thing happens and if it's successful and if people realize change, then we can use that body of information to be able to say, you know what, now we need to go to where we really should be. And so if this is something that you have benefited from or have a story to tell, make sure you share your stories. Because as we go to the next session, we want to make sure that we have stories and real people that we can make sure we're advocating for. And also, if you want to be an advocate, you know, come and figure out where you can tell your story in front of the people that can make the change. So with that, I want to open it up to you all for questions of our panelists. To those of you that have been working on issues that you want this group to know, to be able to share those reforms and talk about what implementation demands as part of the reforms that you worked on that haven't been discussed here. So if you could just say your name.
Hi, my name is Ambria Davis Alexander. I am a Rising 2L at the University of Baltimore School of Law. I'm currently intern with the OPD at Howard County, and I have a question for Director Workin about the jury disqualification. So currently I'm doing research on the expanded pilot program for voir dire. And I was just wondering if, and sorry if this is not appropriate, but how do you foresee this impacting jury selection, and would this be an expansion of the current Batson challenge that's currently happening?
It's such a great question. I think there's no way that these things can't be interrelated on some level. Again, because we're talking about, there are different really critical sub-issues with a broader issue of can we get access to fair juries, and how are our juries chosen, and how does the voir dire process happen? So I think the short answer is yes, we should be thinking about these things in concert, and right now we're not, and this is a brand new policy that hasn't even gone into effect yet. I think the longer answer, and the one I'm certainly not prepared, is like, what does it actually mean, and how do we better collaborate across some of those different lines of work right now? But I think it's a really great question. And the other thing that I'm glad you asked a question about the jury service piece and the research that you're doing, because I feel like I failed to kind of highlight something really important about the significance of SB 322, which might relate to some of these other conversations as well, which is that this isn't just a fairness issue and a systemic legitimacy issue. There's actually really powerful and compelling research that diverse juries do better.
Yeah.
They do better. They produce more fair verdicts. They deliberate, they consider a wider range of perspectives. They make fewer factual errors. They have greater willingness to surface and challenge implicit bias in the justice process. And so that was another thing we were trying to lift up in Annapolis. Like, do we care about systemic legitimacy? Do we care about public safety? Do we care about juries getting it right? These are all reasons why we need to make these changes. And I think they relate to the other changes in areas as well.
Thank you. Somebody in the back had a question. Oh, okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Khadijah. I'm currently a campaign manager with the Maryland Senate Democrats, and I also work with Live Druid Hill. I wanted to ask Trina, was there a particular experience or event that happened that made you want to start out for justice?
Absolutely. I don't know, a lot of people, nobody can know the story, but I have a handful. In 2000, I was sentenced to two 12-year sentences for the stand-up. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Excuse me, I was sentenced to 2 12-year sentences. I was scheduled to go back to court in March of 2003, but I opted to stay till July because I was getting certification in human services. I knew if I didn't come home, I was gonna go back. So I stayed. I did every program at MCIW. I came home to 2 programs because I had to get into a long-term residential treatment program and drug treatment. So I did all of that, complied with 2 programs. I showed up to 1 every day because I couldn't find a job. I had to check a box on an application indicating that I had been convicted of a crime. I got tired of checking those boxes, Khadija, and I decided I was gonna get rid of them. So I asked my daddy to help me join a little steering committee, and that's what we did. And then Alpha Justice turned into this greatness with all of y'all.
Other questions? Yes.
It's not necessarily a question, but it was speaking to what Heather was saying about jury disqualification. Because we're looking right now throughout the country what happened to Carmelo Anthony, right? So all white jury, some people say self-defense or whatever, but at the same time, for individuals that's not on the jury that look like him, and they come from his community, now he has 35 years, now he has to fight for his freedom. And as an impacted person that spent time in prison, I understand the process, the injustice, right? So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to recognize that this is a great bill that's been put forth, and we need to exercise this right, especially at these days and time. Right? So I commend them for working on this, because when you sit on a jury or you're in a courtroom and someone's weighing your or has your life in your hand, right? That's heavy, right? That's very heavy. And I'm not discounting the victims or somebody that might have went through something traumatic, but at the same time, both sides lose if it's not your peers judging you and giving you a fair sentence, regardless of whatever it is.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you so much for making that really powerful point, Terry. And I wanted to underscore something that we talked about earlier, and then something that you just brought up in a powerful way, especially when, I brought up that crime victim example, like we don't have a blanket. Like many people who have been involved in the system who were excluded from juries also have been victims, and vice versa. And the whole point of this and the driving force behind this change is that our worst, most traumatic moments don't define us as people. We all bring such a huge range of life experiences to when we get that jury summons. And that's why the voir dire process exists, to really understand what are the relevant questions to ask. And because we're not a monolith, like people who have, had a conviction, people who have experienced a crime. Again, many of those people are the same people. They have different diversity within those communities. It doesn't mean, like, it was really interesting, some of the testimony put forward, like from the State's Attorneys Association, that people could serve on juries who had past system involvement, like, would be more lenient, which was that's not what the research says. It's like people are way more complicated than any one specific life experience that they might have. We are a totality of all of our perspectives. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
Who do you reach out to the jury to get more money? They only give $30. Do you think that somebody who is struggling out here, who maybe makes $75, gonna take off their job to get $30 to do something that re-traumatizes you? Because sometimes that's why we don't serve. We have to keep it real. Some people may give a worse judge or opinion. I just went last week, so that's why I've heard a lot of stories outside of the courtroom that people were saying, I ain't never going to serve because my brother was killed or my daddy died on that same street. I'm not saying they should be exempt, but for $30, I got to come and reopen my own wounds. So it's always why some people don't serve. It's not always just because they don't want to do their civic duty. To give me $30 is not even, and not that $100 would make it, but it might make it better for someone. So that was 2 points I wanted to make.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's why this is a long road. It's a long road of not just practical implementation, but equity. Like, what is it? Do we have the conditions and the supports in place to make that even a viable option for people practically and emotionally? So thank you for raising it.
If I can also just jump in on that, because you asked who do you talk to, please approach any one of us after this, because I will tell you that we're in contact with some national partners called the Juror Project specifically, that's looking at 5 specific categories. One is pay, one is also the exactly what you mentioned, the psychosis of the individuals who are impacted that are now going to have to re-traumatize themselves, and what is the proper compensation for that, and how are there other business models that can be established and from paid days off and everything else like that with certain businesses to ensure that that specific population is able to participate. So just know those conversations are happening. And the beauty of mentioning Kiana Johnson is that she's actually on the board of that national nonprofit doing this juror work. So like there's a whole slate of bills that are probably going to be introduced in 2027. It's going to be a very busy session in 2027 on top of all this, and we need impacted persons in your stories to kind of back those things up. So please talk to me.
I just want to, before Christopher, you were speaking, where's your office located at?
Yeah, so I got a lot of different. So, I will say on behalf of the Center for Urban Families, they're located at 2201 North Monroe Street. Yeah, and they do family, like I said, family strengthening and workforce development. They're phenomenal. Right across the street from New Shiloh Baptist Church. Yeah.
So before we get to another question, one of the things that we'd like you to think about is what is the global impact of the low pay for jury selection? That cuts a certain level of people off in terms of being able to serve on juries. The disqualification, as Heather mentioned, that cuts out what, a third of Black men. You know, all of these restrictions all lead to a way to get only a certain type of person on juries. And so as we bring up these issues, we need to bring up all the issues. You know, pay has a racial disparity factor to it because, you know, very few of us can afford to take off a whole day and then only get $40. So think about what it is about the process that really makes it seem unfair. There's a bigger goal there, is to make sure that certain people don't serve. And so we're at a place right now where we have addressed one of those, but that doesn't end the story. There's a whole lot of other issues that need to be addressed. And so I think, as I talked about, you know, collecting the data, once this change is made, well, how has it impacted juries so that we can say now we need to go further is really important. But it's important to bring up these other issues because they have that same chilling effect that everybody can't participate. And so this is why we want to bring this, because as we start talking about these issues in community, we can start realizing, well, you know what, this is also a problem too. You know, I can only get this services if I'm this type of person or I know this person. And we want to try to break those barriers. Sir?
I'm going to put it from the other side as being one of those people that earns a very good income, okay? And I talked to the other people at my place of employment, happens to be Johns Hopkins University. There's a significant number of people who are really pissed off that the jury pools get to pull you every year. Every year. And routinely for the previous 8 years, I got called every year. I'm now 71 and I can get, because of some family issues, I wound up getting myself exempt, even though I may see if I can get back in. But one of the things, getting rid of these stupid rules, I'm going to put it bluntly, stupid rules. I went through some numbers real quickly. You know what would happen if you allowed the 1/3 of Black males to be part of the jury pools? You know what you can do? You double it. In my really quick back of the envelope numbers, you'll double the available jury pool. And if you take care of some of these other things, you're gonna increase it even farther. And therefore, you won't have this annual call.
The difference up there, I would go to 988. But because I don't get to talk about 988 a whole lot. And there's a lot of disparity in what services are available across the state, which I know because I am a statewide organization. And I've watched presentations about the differences in CIT teams or the lack of CIT teams, which at all. So how are you able to manage that as a statewide service? And then are you able to use your platform as a statewide service to identify gaps and advocate for improvements?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and you're pointing to something that I didn't talk about, but I'll use this opportunity to talk about, which is how the behavioral health crisis response system writ large is still so new, and we're still kind of building it. Building the plane as we're flying it. I know it's a very common phrase. So there is this disparity with the system across the state. So I work just in Baltimore City, and we have been leading this advocacy work statewide because to us it's just really, really important for lots of reasons in the city, and we're happy to partner with all the other helplines and organizations across the state. But I have seen the disparities that you're talking about. Before we established the 988 trust fund and before the feds established guidelines and standards for how they wanted helplines to operate, we even had helplines that were staffed by trained volunteers, not counselors. We don't have that in Maryland, thankfully. We in Maryland, I can say the 988 helplines are doing really well. They are all staffed by counselors. They're meeting the federal standards. They're meeting the federal performance standards as well. But part of how I think Maryland got there is because we did this advocacy work to make that investment. So I think 988 is for Maryland is doing fairly well. Where I do see even greater disparity is with those other services that you can get by calling 988, like the mobile crisis services I talked about. You mentioned CIT, that's crisis intervention team. I assume you mean the training. CIT, which is training that police officers get so that they have mental health awareness and some of the escalation skills. It's not nearly the same as a mental health clinician. I just want to point that out. But it's still very valuable to have officers trained in CIT. Even that isn't statewide across Maryland. I can tell you, even in Baltimore City, not even all of the patrol officers in the city are CIT trained. It is something the city is working towards for the consent decree that they are under. They have to, I can't remember what the target is, I think get to 80%, and they're not there yet. So there's a lot of work to continue to do to build out even just our alternative response system to get it to be the type of response system we want it to be. So you brought up a really good point.
So for the behavioral health legislation, how can we break through do they have any services, or how can we break through the barriers of ignorance of people who are high functioning? They obviously have mental issues, but no one thinks there's anything wrong with them.
Yeah. So I mean, that is something that we see across, or that we do see that with people, and that's where I think. So I will say I'm not a clinician, but that's where I think having counselors and clinicians answering the phone at 988 is so incredibly valuable. They have the skills to help people, to talk to people, and just kind of recognize when there is that disconnect or when someone is actively symptomatic and know what to do in those times. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's why I just think having clinicians answering the call is so important.
Yeah. Okay.
Zach, did you have?
Oh, yes, ask a follow-up. Excuse me, one second. I raised my hand.
Okay, I'm sorry, sir.
My name is Art. I am a longtime member of Alpha Justice. I'm an advocacy for my community. I just wanted to make a statement, right? Talking about the jury. I think we all victims and suspects to an extent, right? If anything happened in your community, you have been a victim in your community, no matter what you do. or you could be a suspect, no matter what you do. It could be the smallest thing. So everything that we do in our community, we are impacted. So being on the jury is important. When you talk about the pay, to some, the pay is not what the purpose is, right? Because it's bigger than the pay. Right. Now, some people can afford to take off. However, it's still a balance. It just, you know, a give and take. Whatever stance you can take, that's what stance you take. And that's what we're here for, to keep moving and building and coming up with ideas so we can figure it out. I just wanted to say that.
So I was just gonna ask Adrian, I wasn't quite sure I heard. For the mobile crisis response units, can you call that on behalf of someone else instead of the police at this point? Okay.
Yes. So you can call loved ones can call 988 for help for their loved ones. One of the things the counselors will want to do is know that you're with the person, so they're getting accurate information. They would love if you would put the person on the phone with them, if that's something the person's willing to do. And part of that is because one of the things our counselors always try to do is get consent from the person to send the team out. Getting that consent is just, it's buy-in that shows that they want the service. We never try to push service on someone. The counselors are always trying to get consent even for safety planning, which you can do over the phone. So that would be like the one caveat, is they really want to know the person that you're trying to help us with them.
Got it. And that makes sense. You know, I had an example that came into mind. I was running a few years ago, and someone that seemed to be in a mental health crisis was being very threatening towards women that were walking by. And I called 988, and it sounds like they would be unable to dispatch in that case. And so it was one of those situations where, like, I don't want to call the cops necessarily because I don't want them to shoot this guy.
Yeah.
On the other hand, like, if I was someone walking by, I'd feel very uncomfortable and perhaps physically threatened. It might call the police. And so I don't know what the needle to be thread there is.
Yeah.
But that's helpful.
Yeah, and we do, so you are pointing to something we call third-party calls, where you don't have a direct relationship with the person that you're seeing that may or may not be in crisis. We are working towards that. It's complicated. But I would say in the interim, until we figure that out, you can always call 911 and request a CIT officer as an alternative.
Got it. Thank you.
First of all, thank you all for the presentations and being here. Something I'm realizing every year, that is a big difference between getting some legislation passed to it really addressing the issue that you was trying to put forward. Out of the bills that you've been working on that you're presenting, what obstacles are there? What problems do you foresee happening with implementation? Because that's an important point. We need to make sure things get done because it was an intent why this bill got passed. So any implementation issues, any problems, what things should be added that weren't added that you realize now? What do we need to work on?
I would say for the bill that that I had mentioned, transfer debt fund D, we're gonna see how that plays out in October when it goes into effect. The wage garnishment caps, the dropping that from 65% to 35% doesn't go into effect until 2028. We're working with the Department of Human Services to ensure that's properly implemented, so we'll know then. And then with license suspensions, it's actually worked as planned. I will say DHS had a lot of heartburn trying to get that into effect, but it's something I am very proud of as a workforce practitioner, that they have like overwhelmingly altered how they operate that system. And then I would say for Fair Chance and Housing, that's the one that I think implementation is going to be the most complex, because there was an element in the bill about I'm not an attorney, but I think it's called a right of action. Bottom line is like ways for private attorneys to be able to sue or handle misclassification cases, or when let's say landlords are not following the proper laws. There was a piece of that was stripped out entirely. So now it's a $500 fine if a landlord over 500. Think about that. Your landlord with over five units, those tend to be people that can handle a $500 fine, right? And then it's handled by the Office of the Attorney General. So like what we're going to be monitoring very closely in partnership with Maryland Legal Aid and others is how does the actual implementation fall out? how are complaints monitored? As of right now, you're supposed to be able to make some phone calls to certain people, or like the landlord is supposed to be able to like give you the reasons that they did not give you the price. For example, if they can't use your record, they can still use your eviction report and stuff like that, right? So we just need to like watch and monitor that and see how the enforcement piece is done. And then what always happens is we take the data from the enforcement side and then turn that into legislation. If there needs to be a separate enforcement piece of legislation, then it's a separate enforcement piece of legislation. We saw this, of course, with women's pre-release, for example. Bill passes in 2020, gets vetoed, passes again in 2021, overridden, and we're still just throwing that out there. So I think research, storytelling, like collecting stories, and then just sharpening, I think women police did a lot of this on like, adding the legislative pieces that didn't work. Speaks. Yes.
So I would just add to that is public education.
Absolutely.
That if people know this is supposed to happen and in their lives, if it does not happen, they can be in a position to say, you know, the law was passed, you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. And to know if it doesn't go the way it's supposed to go, who they can tell about that as we collect that information. I'll give you an example of the stolen benefits bills that passed a couple of years ago. And everybody was like, this is great. You know, you're going to get your money back if were stolen, if your benefits were stolen. And none of the case managers were trained on it. So they were still not giving people their benefits back. People didn't know what forms to fill out. And then the agency decided that they had run out of money and couldn't pay people back. So really getting people to know, but people working on getting people knowing, you know, so we went out to places where we told people, you know what, if your benefits were stolen, these are the forms, we'll help you fill the forms out. You should tell your case manager, and then other problems emerge. But then you know what to do when those problems emerge. And I think there was legislation this year that addressed some of those problems. So it's really trial and error, but making sure that people are able to act on these reforms, and then whatever happens, being able to tell that story.
Yeah,
So let people know.
Sorry, I don't want to belabor it, but that's why, as Zach, we mentioned, like, let us know specifically on anything you've heard us mention. If something is not being properly implemented, you know, we won't know unless you tell us, right? And we won't know unless we do one. This is the reach out right now. So if you're seeing something that's not working, let us know.
So.
Other thing is letting the legislature, who worked diligently to get that bill passed, they want to be able to hang their hat on a win. The last thing in my relationship with legislators they want to be able to say is they get up here, talk about a specific issue, and then somebody goes, well, that didn't work. And it hasn't worked in years. So like they are going to want their legacy to work. And so specifically because they're legislators, they have the abilities to hold departments accountable in ways that the average citizen cannot. So I think strengthening that relationship with legislators is also important.
And those are great answers. If I could just add briefly, build on a couple of those points, the public education, the accountability, the legislative champions like Senator Sidnor with this jury service bill, like they are in it for the long haul and have some of the levers and influence that Chris talked about. But another thing I wanted to lift up was important tools, but also some tensions with using them. So for example, building in timelines, building in funding, building in accountability and measurement, you know, data reporting requirements. Like, is this thing actually happening as part of the legislation can be really effective and huge. But the tension I want to name is that will often drive up a fiscal note. That will often, you know, put pressure or make people like less political will to get the thing done if they think it's more complicated or if they think it's coming with a bunch of strings that certain agencies are going to be on the hook for, and they're like, we can't handle this, or we can't handle this without a ton of money. Those types of things can kill a bill, especially in a time of, you know, fiscal and budget challenges like we're going through right now. So I guess it's balancing like so much of the political will and the public education to light a fire under the decision makers, to light a fire under the people that have the purse strings, to understand that it's a priority, you know, to demand that kind of urgency, to do the to create the political will for the follow-up bills, to implement, to raise the pay, to get the worker protections so that you don't have to take off. Like, that's a right that you have to serve on a jury. So all of that follow-up, to make Governor Moore want to have a proud bill signing ceremony with his name, behind these types of reforms because the community is asking for it.
Hi, my name is Lawrence. I'm a member of Alpha Justice. And my question, or what I'm interested in, is I had a person that was having a crisis. And let me get to the point. Okay, they wasn't able to get a person to come to talk to them. The police came and they took the person in now to a hospital. They when they took the person to the hospital, it was like the person didn't go to the hospital on their own. They went in by force, which they wasn't handcuffs, they wasn't rowdy, they went in. How do you determine the difference between force and going on your own without being, because if you go in by force, to my understanding, they will keep you until they decide whether you should go in. If you go in by volunteer, you can sign and you can come out when you feel like you're ready to come out within supposed to be within 3 days. So do you have any information on that, or how we can be aware of that?
So not listening to what you just told me, it sounds like law enforcement showed up. One of the tools that law enforcement has is something called an emergency petition, where they can force someone to go to the emergency room and get evaluated by a psychiatrist. I don't know if that was what happened in this situation. It sounds like maybe, but I can tell you, when law enforcement gets involved, that is one of the tools that they tend to lean on more when they, can't get a clinician to support them. So I would just point to, again, how our crisis response system can be an alternative. We are seeing in our data, when our mobile response teams go out, they are rarely needing to, they can also do emergency petitions. They are rarely needing to do that. And when they are taking people to the hospital, it's the person's consenting to go, which is always their goal. They're always going to try to work with that person to get their consent to whatever the follow-up treatment is. So without knowing all the specifics of what happened, I can just say we do see law enforcement use emergency petition more. We do see them use force more when they're involved in mental health crises response. Does that help? I don't know if that helps. I'm happy to talk afterwards if
We can talk afterwards, but I just would like to know, because any one of us may have someone that's in crisis, and we might say, okay, we can call 988, but we don't know whether they just off their medicine, and they may be kept longer than what they should be kept, and because of a board making a decision to keep them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would
let the people know, their rights.
I would say call 988, because our data is showing that we're resolving people's issues in the community and not having to have them go to the emergency department.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question for Trina and maybe Christopher about voting registration, post-incarceration. For people that maybe weren't registered before they were incarcerated, or maybe turned 18 while they were incarcerated, what is the policy on that, and maybe like current efforts for reform in that area?
In short, so I will say the legislation that we worked on specifically when we originally moved it, that was the perp, like we wanted to add that. However, because of complications on the implementation side with DPSCS, we stuck to simply, if you were already registered, we're going to re-register you. Now, there is supposed to be programs in place that behind the walls, like if a person wants to register to vote, they can, specifically immediately upon within their exit orientation upon release. But here's the thing. That is something that I have heard That is something that the two people to your right have just nodded their heads to say that that is somewhat accurate, but I have not seen that actually happen in real time. But so but I do want to highlight, just in case people don't know this, that regardless of what your record is, once you are released, you do have the right to vote in the state of Maryland. So I know there's been a lot of efforts to ensure that people can register while they're behind the walls, but many people don't know. Sometimes they forget it. Sometimes corrections doesn't necessarily replace, push that packet when it's supposed to be pushed.
What Ross was speaking about, where there is President Trump signed Executive Order 14321 titled Ending Crime and Disorder on American Streets. It mandates the clearing of outdoor homeless encampments and redirects federal funding towards involuntary civil commitment, rehabilitation, and forced treatment programs for people experiencing homelessness, mental illness, or substance abuse. That's Donald Trump's executive order about what Ross was talking about, is taking people off the street. That's an executive order from Donald Trump. And I've said, I've seen it happen, it's going on, and people some say are just being taken off the street. And it's like you say, it's taken off the street by force, and they take you in, go in on your own, you can sign yourself in and out. But other than that, you can't get out, some say, until they let you out. That's the executive order. That's it, 14321. I got it right here.
There's been a lot of movement throughout the country to clear homeless people, to criminalize homelessness.
Yeah, I know that.
And so there's been a lot of movements, and we have a local expert on that, Mr. Hannibal, that can talk about what happened in Maryland with relation to those issues.
We can talk.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you so much for all being here today. That doesn't really have to be said. I think we're all in agreement there. This is a question, a follow-up on the 988 services that are provided. I recently lived in another state, just came back home. So glad to be back in Baltimore City. But there were comparable services, hotlines for behavioral health crises that would not provide services for minors and juveniles. And if you did call the service in the area, the police would be sent out, or you would be immediately, they would immediately take the individual and send them to the emergency room, and then they would be put in a behavioral health center or hospital without consent, without involvement of the parents until way afterwards. And I don't think this really needs to be said, but there is a pipeline for a lot of individuals who don't have a lot of support from their families or have the funds necessary to get treatment, where you end up in a center like this, and then you are sent to the foster care system, to other systems of the like. Does the 988 system in Baltimore provide services to juveniles and minors?
It does, and we do not do that. Good. So I think some of what you're pointing to might be, so different states, there are federal standards for how 988 and the crisis system is to operate. Thankfully, nothing like that is in the set federal standards.
This is in Florida.
Don't
for
give them any
context.
ideas.
There you go.
Glad to be back.
Let me tell you what we do in Florida. But states have the authority to promulgate their own regulations for crisis services, and they can add on to what the federal things are. So that may be the policy that they have set in Florida. We don't have anything like that here in Maryland, thankfully. And I can tell you, we do serve youth at 988. We actually you can call, text, and chat our 988 helpline. We are seeing a lot of youth the text and chat function. We don't ask when people call, we don't ask, how old are you? And do you have your mom or your parents? We don't ask that kind of stuff. What a way to turn someone off and get them to not talk to you. We don't even collect demographic information. It is anonymous. The call counselors are really trying to connect with you and find out what are the ways they can help you. So we don't do any of that.
Well, that's a relief to hear, and thank you.
All right, one more question. Sir?
I guess it's even, and I've been in so many meetings, I don't even know when I'm at. I got to go, so this is gonna be quick. Safety director, site director, State Streets, Baltimore, Penn North, right? And everything by everybody speaking speaks volumes. And I'm just saying, I'm on the youth piece because the purposes, the circumstances that we find in the Penn North area is oftentimes leaving the youth fending for themselves. And if they don't have a phone, they can't call somebody, right? And if they don't have that connection that they need, they're gonna be out. So I want to be able to bring some resources. I'm gonna give my number out because I got another meeting to go to. So give my number out. I'm on 605 Baker Street. Reach out to me. The young man who works at Center for Urban Families. You're making Jones, you're making Joe real proud right now. Make no mistake about it. But 443-552-8928, because what I'm hearing is there's a disconnect between wanting to involve law enforcement, because we know that situation can go bad, right? Because they fear for their life out there, right? And they're not going to hesitate to put an individual, psychiatric problem or not, down when that may not be what we need, because then it makes my job hard. We attack shootings and homicides from a behavioral health approach. We believe there's a cure for that. And we do that through conflict mediation, intervention, identifying, detecting the situations that go on when violence uptake in the community. So that's what brought me here. I forgot who I called. She probably here, but thank you so much. You know, your hair looks different. You know, the women always switching up on them. But they always get the job done. So long story short, I want to provide resources to the Penn North community. I have from Baker Street up to North Avenue, from Pennsylvania to Fulton, and from, as you already know, in between, everything in between there. I do 3 events a month.
And what's your name?
Sheik Johnson Day. I do 3 events a month.
Give Ms. Kendra your information so we can get you involved in our
443
program as well.
552-8928. S Johnson Bay at CC, no BEY, no hyphen after the Johnson, at cc-md.org.
Thank you. All right.
Last thing I want to, how you been, man? Last thing I want to say is what partnerships are y'all partnering with the Mayor's Office of Victim Services? Okay, so help me out. Okay, because I know they do good work. With that said, peace be upon everyone. I wish I didn't have to go because I would like to stick around and ask questions with some people. You know what I'm saying? Thank you.
I think this has been awesome, particularly with your participation. I want to give just a couple of minutes. If there's someone out in the audience, like this gentleman, who has resources that you feel we should know about, you can either leave your information and we can get it out to the group, or if you want to briefly just tell us, we've got maybe 10 minutes. We want to make sure that we get as much public information out as possible.
Once again, Terry speaks out for Justice Leadership Development Organizer. We do expungements. I do a men's healing circle. We have women's healing circle. We have leadership development. We have a whole host of things. I have resources if you need drug treatment, mental health, whatever. Phone number 443-202-1520. Empower at @4justice.org. I go all over the country. I speak. I do whatever. It's about the youth. It's about saving our community. It's about removing barriers. It's about being intentional about the things that we do, not working in different silos, right? This is good. Yeah, exactly. This is good, right? And I commend everybody for being here, but we got to stop working in all these different silos and understand that it's about the youth. It's about the people. We all want safe communities. We all want a livable wage, right? But how we're going to get there is by working together. So I thank you. I thank my boss. Love you, Jay.
Like 20 years ago, I used to call y'all the public pretender. Until I met this wonderful man named Gregory Fisher. He said, I stayed for 2 years, right? And I didn't pay that man no mind, but guess what? He came back and got me. So shout out to y'all. All right.
Hello, Nadine Finnegan Carr, Executive Director of the Center for Violence Prevention at University of Maryland, Baltimore. And I do want to say that next Tuesday, we're hosting a moderated panel on gun violence in the media based on a report that we did on the racialization of us when they report on gun violence in the media. So we will be doing that. It will be myself, Lawrence Grandpree from Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, and Joe Richardson from University of Maryland College Park. If you go to Eventbrite and just search racialized media, it'll come up. And we still have space for a couple more people. So if you're interested, come on out. Next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Where? And where? University of Maryland, Baltimore. Thank you.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nicole Ross, and I'm representing two different organizations. The first one is mine. It's called Auntie, Always Uplifting and Nurturing Through Internal Empowerment. And then we also have which is Unleashing New Knowledge. So our vision and our mission is to help children within the foster care system and at-risk youth. Oftentimes we see that nobody shows up for them. They're often forgotten. They're in the system. No parents, anybody's coming to celebrate them. So our mission is to mentor, to empower them, to uplift them, to guide them, give them resources, connect them, bring the village to them. So I appreciate what you guys have here and the resources that you guys have. And then the other organization I'm representing is Awake. So I have two brothers who are currently incarcerated in Patuxent. They are Georgetown scholars, and they will be getting their bachelor's degree this year. So they are Quentin Bradby and Vontae Gaffney. Both of these gentlemen, they have worked very hard to do work inside. They do have peer recovery certification. They also facilitate the day program, the Help Everyone Yearns. And right now, what they're doing is internally, they're mentoring juveniles as well as their peers to change the mentality of the criminal mindset and to prevent recidivism. And they're doing it internally and trying to now do it externally too, to have the guys that have been incarcerated but got that education to be able to change the narrative. So I thank you guys for this platform and just to watch for you guys to look out for what they're doing in the community.
Hi, I'm Ann Pack. I'm co-founder and director of advocacy for Prepare, and we do parole education, support through the parole process, advocacy around the parole process, holistic reentry planning, post-release support. Since I hear there are people with impacted family members, we do have materials behind the walls on the tablets. We have our website. If you just type Prepare Parole into Google, we are your first search result. I am Ann, ANNE, at prepare-parole.org or 410-994-6136. If you have a loved one who is behind the walls, they have information on the tablets. They can write to us. We can support them in that process. We can help you learn about the process. And we also do trainings for our organizations on either parole or holistic reentry planning.
Any other organizations that want to lift up what you do? All right. Oh, okay. Excuse me. No organizations. Hello, everybody. My name is Kendra Lindsay. I am the executive associate here. And thank you to all the panelists. You guys did amazing. Thank you to all of the summer law clerks and interns. I just want to say, if you didn't sign in, you can meet me in the back. That's all. That's all I wanted to say, because that's important. So thank you for coming out to this event. I want to thank you all for participating. One of the fundamental tenets of the Maryland Justice Partnership is to reduce silos and to work on implementation. So to take these great reforms and make sure that, one, people know about them, that all of the players that can make them happen are at the table, and that accountability is holistically asked for with relation to reducing mass incarceration and racial disparities for those that have some contact with the system, any system. And so if that is something that's interesting to you, please provide us with your name. You can give it to Ms. Kendra that just stood up, so that we can invite you to our table and have you come, whatever issues that you feel particularly connected to, whatever services you feel need a wider audience, whatever connections that you feel need to be made in order to make sure that the reforms or outcomes that you're trying to have, we can work towards those outcomes, because that's what we're really about. It's great to pass legislation, but if it doesn't result in the outcomes that are promised, it really doesn't happen, and it creates frustration as opposed to liberation. And so that's what we're looking at. So, go ahead.
I just have one quick question, burning quick question. How do you find out where the bills are passed so I can share this stuff with my community? I worked elections yesterday and people were asking me who won. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know these answers. I work in a senior building. I'm involved in a lot of things, but I need to know, like, people want quick, fast, and dirty, not all this long, come to a meeting. They're like, look, go to here it is.
Yeah.
Y'all have that?
That is the first part. Many of these, if not all of these advocates, have what are called scorecards that we can make available so that you can have that information at your fingertips. So we will provide that as a follow-up information.
No, I mean, so that's each person. If Ms. Jones asks me what bill is coming up and what was passed from this meeting, I would have to contact each person. Is that how legislation
We will
works?
give you the information.
No, I'm still confused.
I think she went to the general website.
The website.
Website to see who won.
Yeah,
It's
like,
What are the results? Oh, I don't know. I don't have that.
It's Maryland General.
I can get that information to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
At the very least for elections, the Board of Education has done a really good job recently, like scaling and like explaining everything. If you look at the Board of Education, Maryland State Board of Education website, it has the results very, very quickly. We have pie charts. We have
Board of Election. SBA.
Yes. They have everything. It's extremely clear and easy to read. It's the Maryland State Board of Elections, right, guys? Yes. If you want this for elections, and as for legislation, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the My MJA website. I'm not sure if that's specifically answering the question, but it's during the legislative session and outside of it, it particularly tracks like the status of the existence of existing legislation going back very many years. You'll see like the text for bills that passed.
What
all of that. It's called My MGA. My
They
MGA.
put 90-day report.
That's.
I think we'll get you the information. But anyway, I just wanted to thank everybody for participating. Please contact us if you want more information. As Madam Public Defender said, we host these events throughout the state, Tuesday and fourth Sunday, and she would like to make a final statement.
No, I'll say thank you to everyone for coming out. If you do not follow us, please, on all, if not all, social media, pick your favorite. Follow us so you know where we are next time. We are the Office of the Public Defender. We are in the community. We are for the community. We uplift community. We will be in Montgomery County next week, and we'll be in another part of the state. If you're willing to travel, we welcome you. Again, stay connected with us. Please follow us on social media.